Hi, my name's Alex Scherma. I'm the chef up at the Ganjier campus, which is over here in Miranda. For anyone that doesn't know, it's a cannabis sommelier program that moved up here to Humboldt in 2020, maybe 2021, one of those years. In Miranda, Miranda, Salmon Creek, yeah, Salmon Creek. A little north of here. You know, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. But it's actually on the property Javier used to live on. That was the YMAA retreat center, and now it has been home to the Ganjier campus. No, it's up the hill a little bit. Yeah, Salmon Creek area. In Salmon Creek, yeah. So we do private events, and actually this is perfect because the very next thing I was going to say is anyone who has a question or anything, if I say anything that doesn't make sense, just either shoot up your hand or shout at me, and I'd love for it to be as engaged as possible. So it is not a restaurant, no. It is home to a cannabis sommelier program that essentially it's called Ganjier. And what we do there is we train people on the assessment of cannabis. And so while this region is incredibly steeped in history with cannabis, especially in terms of cultivation, processing, culture, genetics, this is really focused on the consumption of cannabis. And so it attracts people from all over the world that have engaged in it more on that side generally, and also cultivators from all over that want to engage with the history in a different way. But people come from all over, and basically 1 week out of each month, 6 months a year, we have a group of people train them in the assessment of cannabis. So the idea is to try to figure out how do we bring market value to the consumer? What are the consumers seeing versus what are the producers seeing? And how do we make the connection between those things? Because we're in a new world of cannabis now where people are introduced to it first through like gummies at a gas station without ever touching the plant. And I'm a little weird for my age where like I wasn't exposed to it that way. I was exposed to it in my own basement, obsessed in my house. And so my relationship to it was a little bit different. And as I started to engage in what was an emerging industry, and I was in North Carolina for a long time. So as I started to engage with what was an emergent industry, the way that it was being perceived as like a consumer packaged good didn't really resonate. And I think part of the reason that that's possible is because most people don't really have engagement with the plant at this point. They're able to touch it from a consumer point forward and not necessarily from that relationship. And really, there aren't that many places in this country where outdoor cultivation is like held as a craft. And we have certain regions that are, and this is one of them. I came here in 2021 to take the Ganjier program, and honestly, I didn't know what it was going to be. It sounded fun. I saw it on Instagram, and it literally sounded fun. And I'm a little like introverted and weird, and so like the big cannabis events, they're way too overstimulating for me. I never knew how to connect with anyone. I never knew how to come out of my hole and engage with the community. And this was something that was more education based. It was a little nerdier, and it was like 12 to 15 people in a room. So like for my brain, it was much more absorbable. And I came out to Humboldt at a very strange time in 2021. And so I saw a very different version of Humboldt than what it's been for the past years and years and years and years. I've really seen this more modern-ish version where it's losing some of those things in a way that is very, very painful. And then also as an outsider coming in, very, very beautiful. Because the people that are here now and like what I've gotten to see of Humboldt is mostly like people really caring about this area, really wanting what's best for this area, wanting to bring the past forward in a way that brings new life to this area rather than it be like a producer of money. Because ultimately, once we get into large scale agriculture, and this is what I really saw in North Carolina, because cannabis is legal in the entire country now. It's just called hemp. And the reason it's called hemp is because that's what tobacco companies want it to be. It's a way for those entities to buy in because they don't want all the regulation that has come with state by state legalization. It doesn't allow their playbook to happen. And so there had to be a different playbook. And what this has led to is an oversupply in the entire nation. Like in pretty much every state in the country, you can just order weed on the internet. And through, whether you want to call it a loophole or whatever you want to call it with the THCA laws, it's actually weed. Like you can just order weed or rosin or hash on the internet to your door from any state now legally. And so that happened in sort of a weird, quiet way. It wasn't in the same way that legalization has happened state by state. It happened because Mitch McConnell championed part of the Farm Bill. That's literally why it happened. And it's turned hemp or cannabis into a large-scale agricultural product that's basically being treated like corn, wheat, or soy, being extracted for its essence, and it doesn't really matter how it's grown or what it's grown with. And those are the products that, for the majority of the hemp market, is accessible. So there are some clean products in the hemp market. Most of them are isomerized extracts, which is basically changing an extract into another extract. So if anyone's heard of Delta 8, it's that essentially. And my partner will probably talk about this a little bit further in the next talk. But it's not really like what most of us know as weed. And there is a real future where the version of weed that I know I fell in love with, that was a very whole plant medicine that led me to my own journey to health in figuring out, like, how do I feed this thing? How do I keep it alive? How do I make it so that it resonates with me when I smoke it? There's a reality of that dying off and being replaced by consumer packaged goods. And it's hard for me to see a world where that's the best version, like where that's even something I want to smoke, which is really like what it is for me. I'd love to say it's all this virtue, but it's not. It's that I want to smoke good weed for like my whole life. And so when I came out here, I was inspired by what the Ganjier was doing, and what I really wanted to do was take it a step forward. Because if we're going to be creating the idea of like a cannabis sommelier, the thing a sommelier does is tells you how to pair your wine with food in a restaurant. It creates an elevation to the product that also connects it to our consumption in a greater sense. And this is a really unique area, as everyone in this room I'm sure knows, because of the microclimates. And so one of the things I really fell in love with when I came out here was the Arcata Farmers Market. Because in the late summer, you have so many microclimates represented in such a small area that all come from this little county. And it's not super normal. Like the ability to turn a corner and it drops 20 degrees and you have a totally different expression of the same exact plant, whether it's cannabis, a pepper, leafy greens, is not common in most places. And so it gives the opportunity to like show a lot of diversity in one area and really show a lot of diversity of flavor in one area. And so when I came back in 2022, I came out here for a Korean natural farming course where I met my friend who's at the back that just whistled. Afterwards, I messaged the managing director of Ganjier, who is the owner of the property up there now, Derek Gilman. And I was like, hey, can I come check out the new campus? They originally held the trainings at Cookie's One Log and moved up to this property to make it a more immersive experience. And he was like, yes. And I had just gone to the Arcata Farmers Market, and I showed up with no plans whatsoever. I had bought a one-way ticket out here, and I went to his house and smoked a joint with him and his partner, and I basically offered to cook dinner for them. And he was like, no, because I was a random person offering to cook dinner. Um, but his partner chimed in and was like, but we do need someone to cook for the staff members at Ganjier next week. And I was like, yeah, I'll totally do that. And I think that hesitation shifted significantly once I came and made some food. Um, for me, food has become this like expression. Like, I say I'm a chef. This happened because people told me I was a chef. I was a guy who loved showing my love with food, and I was learning all these things about how do we actually feed ourselves, how do we reduce inflammation through food, how do we like bring a more holistic approach to what we're eating, and how do we like connect that to the farms, to the farmer, and like close the gap a little bit in terms of our relationship to food. And so this area just really inspired me by how possible that was. And I came from a little mountain town in North Carolina where it was also relatively possible, but it didn't have quite the steep changes in elevation that it does here. And so you don't have quite the range of expression. And that week of cooking snowballed into them bringing me on to cook everything for the program while it was happening, and also a nice partnership with the owner of the property, where now we hold other events where we try to bring in this elevated form of consuming cannabis, where it's looking at the and sometimes that's in the form of dab pairing dinners. Sometimes it's something more traditional with hashish. Sometimes it's a private event for a company. But the idea is, how do we expose people to this plant and the consumption of this plant in a way, and also like all the plants that are represented within that space, how do we do that in a way where it shows the heritage of where this plant came from, it shows the significance of the region, it shows why it's important to have it come from a specific environment, and also educates people on this is how we consume it. So we've done tea pairing events, and I'll be serving tea here throughout the evening as well if anyone wants to talk to me further about this. But it's all about this idea of how do we bring cannabis into a new gustatory realm in a way that you have every level of engagement with it. So you're able to bring in people that are already consumers and show them a new way of looking at it. You're able to bring in people that are not consumers at all and expose them to it in a way that's maybe a little bit more palatable than what's been seen previously. And then how do we also make it so that it fulfills both of those realms, where it can become something that's extremely high end, but also on the other side, the bottom end of it isn't a poison product, because we're getting more and more to the point where the race to the bottom hasn't created the availability of clean, healthy medicine, but has created the availability of poison products that are meant to be steered towards just the drug effect. And so how do we create kind of like a more holistic world about that?